All right, so section 9.5 in the textbook today, the topic is finding the area of rectangles and squares. So first thing we're going to go talk about is what's the difference between a rectangle and a square. Hopefully, you guys know how to recognize what a rectangle and a square look like, right? But let's define it mathematically. Both rectangles and squares have right angles at every corner. So that's something that they have in common. Every corner is a right angle in a rectangle and a square. The mathematical definition for a rectangle is that the opposite sides are congruent. So this side and this side have the same measure, the same length, and then this pair of opposite sides have the same length. What makes a square unique is that all four sides are the same. So the measure of all four sides is the same on a square. Okay, so what makes them the same? A square and a rectangle both have right angles on all four angles. But what's different is that a square has all sides congruent, where a rectangle has opposite sides congruent. Okay, a definition. The area of a figure is the number of square units needed to cover the surface. The number of square units needed to cover the surface. Another vocabulary word, a formula, is an equation that shows a relationship among certain quantities. Those are two definitions that you guys need to learn. The area of a figure. An area is always measured in square units. A formula is an equation that shows a relationship among certain quantities. Okay, let's go talk about a new concept. How do we find the area of a rectangle? The area of a rectangle. Your book uses the vocabulary words that it's the product of the length and width. If you want to use the formula A equals length times width, I've also seen it in a lot of textbooks. Instead of saying length times width, they say base times height. Base times height. So they say area equals base times height. Either formula works. This is the base, this is the height. So one more time, if you want to use your textbook, you can say that its area is length times width. This is going to be the length L. This is going to be the width W. Okay, now let's go talk about the area of a square. The area of a square is equal to the length of the side squared. The length of the side squared. So we say A is equal to S squared. That's the formula to find the area of a square. Now the length of each side is going to be S. Okay, let's go back up to concept number 2. What was the area of a rectangle? We said it was length times width. That applies here to the square too. The area is equal to the length, which is S, times the width, which is also S. Remember when you had two bases down here, we could say that that was S squared. That's where this formula comes from. Okay, let's go do some examples. Find the area of the rectangle or the square. Be sure your answer includes the correct unit. Okay, this is a rectangle. What was the formula for the area of a rectangle? It was length times width. Let's go over to our picture. Our length is going to be 8 centimeters, and our width is going to be 2 centimeters. So our area is going to be 8 times 2, which is 16. Now it says to be sure your answer includes the correct unit. Remember that area is always answered in square units. Okay, it was measured in 8 centimeters by 2 centimeters. So our unit is going to be 16 square centimeters. Another way to write that is 16 centimeters squared. How do you read that? You can say centimeters squared, or you can say square centimeters. That's just notation. Okay, question for you. How do you know which side is the length and which side is the width? It doesn't really matter. Because what if my rectangle had been drawn like this? And I said, okay, now the length is 2 centimeters and the width is 8 centimeters. Does it really matter? No. So anytime you're finding the area of a rectangle, take the unit of the length of one side and multiply it by the length of the other side. If you did the length of 2 times 8, that's going to be equal to 8 times 2. So it doesn't matter which one you label as the length and which one you label as the width. Let's go do number 2. Number 2 says find the area of the rectangle whose dimensions are 4.2 millimeters by 3 millimeters. First, I'm going to assign a length and a width. I'm going to say that my length is 4.2 millimeters and my width is 3 millimeters. We know to find the area of a rectangle, we do length times width. So we're going to write down what is our length. It was 4.2 times our width, which is 3. Over to the side, because I don't do arithmetic in my head, I'm going to go do 4.2 times 3. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 4 is 12. This problem was a multiplication problem with a decimal in it. I need to move my decimal place to the left 1, so my answer is 12.6. So my area will be 12.6 square millimeters, and I'm going to write that with shorthand notation like this, millimeters squared. Okay, let's look at number 3. Find the area of the rectangle that has dimensions 5.5 feet by 2/3 of a foot. So I'm going to assign my length to be 5.5 feet and my width to be 2/3 feet. My formula says the area of a rectangle is equal to length times width. I see that I have fractions involved. I have to go back and remember when I multiply fractions, I have to convert this mixed number into an improper fraction. So this mixed number becomes 2 times 5 is 10 plus 1 is 11 over 2 feet. Again, if I want to convert 5 1/2 into an improper fraction, I keep my denominator and I say 2 times 5 is 10 plus 1 would give me 11. Okay, so I'm going to go over here to my formula. The area is equal to the length, which is 11/2, times the width, which is 2/3. When you multiply straight across. 11 times 2 is 22 over 2 times 3, which is 6. Now, is this in simplified reduced form? I see that a 2 will go into both the numerator and the denominator. So I'm going to divide this one by 2 and divide this one by 2. And I get 11/3. Okay, if you're allowed to leave your answer in improper fraction form, you've got to still put your unit on it. Since the length and the width were measured in feet, this would be square feet. So 11/3 feet squared. If you need to write that as a mixed number, you need to come over here and do 11 divided by 3. 3 will go into 11 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. Do your subtraction. 11 minus 9 is 2. That's your remainder. So your answer would be 3 2/3 square feet. Okay, for number 4, find the area of the square if each side measures 6 millimeters. If you can remember that the formula for the area of a square is side squared, your side is length 6 millimeters, so you would do 6 squared. You have a base raised to an exponent, so that really means to do 6 times 6, right? Don't make the mistake and say that's 6 times 2. That's not what exponents mean to do. You multiply the base by itself 2 times. 6 times 6 is 36. And our unit is going to be square millimeters. And the shorthand notation is to write it millimeters squared. Now, if you can't remember the area formula for a square, you know that a square is also a rectangle. If this length is 6 millimeters and this length is 6 millimeters, if you use the area for a rectangle, length times width, you would get 6 times 6, which is 36 square millimeters. All right, number 5. We have that the side length of a square is 5.1 centimeters. The formula for the area of a square is side squared. So we want to do 5.1 squared. The base is 5.1, the exponent is 2. So that formula tells us to do 5.1 times 5.1. I cannot do that in my head, so I'm going to come over to the side and say 5.1 times 5.1. 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times 5 is 5. I need my placeholder of a 0. Then I do 5 times 1 is 5. 5 times 5 is 25. Now I add 1 plus 0 is 1. 5 plus 5 is 10, carry my 1. 5 plus 1 is 6, and a 2. I have 2 decimal places, so I need to scoot the decimal over 2 times. My answer will be 26.01. I measured it in centimeters, measured both sides in centimeters, so this is going to be 26.01 centimeters squared. Last example, number 6. I have a square that has a side length 1 1/6 yards. I know the area formula for a square is side squared. So I want to do 1 1/6 squared. That means to do 1 1/6 times 1 1/6. When I'm multiplying fractions, I can't multiply mixed numbers. That's just yuck. So I need to convert those mixed numbers into improper fractions. Over to the side, 1 1/6 gives me how many sixths? I do 6 times 1 is 6, plus 1 is 7. 1 1/6 is the same as 7 sixths. So I have 7 sixths times 7 sixths. Multiplying straight across, 7 times 7 is 49 over 6 times 6, which is 36. If you're allowed to leave your answer in improper fraction form, your answer would be 49/36 yards squared. Don't forget the units. If you can't leave it as an improper fraction, you need to come over to the side and do 49 divided by 36. 36 times 1 is 36. Do the subtraction. 9 minus 6 is 3. 4 minus 3 is 1. So my mixed number becomes 1 13/36. So another way to write this answer as a mixed number is 1 13/36 square yards.